Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you to a joint meeting today. This is a special workshop meeting for the Oak Harbor City Council, and it is also a special meeting for the Oak Harbor Planning Commission, so we're meeting together today jointly for the first time in a long time. I will call the meeting to order at this. It is May 17th, 2023, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So I'd like to call the Oak Harbor City Council meeting to order, and I'd like to turn to Planning Commission Vice Chair John CHASZAR to call the meeting to order on behalf of the Planning Commission. Mr. CHASZAR?
Good afternoon. First, thank you very much for meeting. This is a pleasure on our part, and we hope we do this more often. My name is John CHASZAR. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. I have in attendance Commissioner Bonson, Commissioner Plumley, and myself. We have a quorum, so I'd like to open up the Planning Commission meeting as well. Thank you.
Super. I think what I'll do is ask City Council, and then you can also join us to introduce themselves, so that we can get to know you a little better, and for the public that are watching. So, Mr. Wiesner, would you start off?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Jim Wiesner.
Councilmember Beth Munns, and I served 7, almost 8 years on Planning Commission before running for council.
Councilmember Tara Heisen.
And I'm Mayor Bob Severns.
Councilmember Shane Hoffmeyer. Thank you guys so much. Your civic involvement allows council to be successful. Thank you.
Councilmember Eric Marshall.
Councilmember Brian Stuckey, and also was on the Planning Commission, as I believe Councilmember Marshall was.
Okay, this will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Some members of city staff and consultants are participating via teleconference. Today's meeting may be viewed live on YouTube, Facebook, and available for viewing after the meeting on cable channel 10, HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council and perhaps even the Planning Commission may allow or request public participation. That is up to them. So we'll start today's meeting by turning to our city administrator to review the purpose of the joint meeting. Mr. Oborn?
Mayor, thank you for putting that on for me. So, talking to our Development Services Director, David Cool, this is something that's been talked about for 3 years. We go ahead and put it on calendar, and then all of a sudden we end up with 3 vacancies on the Plan Commission and 1 person that couldn't make it. So, but I think it's certainly a real benefit for the 3 members that we have here, and like we talked about, doing it more often together is not a bad idea. And I've been in other municipalities where we did public hearings on I know there were some public hearings that I remember that were at the Plan Commission. I thought it would have been beneficial for the council to be part of that. So we'll continue to work toward ways to work together. So in talking about the subject matter here tonight, we looked at items that would be of mutual interest. So I think we've got some great plans here. A lot of times I hear the same presentation at the Plan Commission, then go to council the next day and hear it again. So I just get to hear this presentation by our planners here on capital improvements and key projects all at one time, and so it's really good with the interaction and with council and Plan Commission and interacting together. And I appreciate Councilmember Stuckey for kind of evening out the table here on the side. So here, because of the kind of the vacancies that we have here. And with that, our Development Services Director, David Cool, if you want to provide any comments for introduction.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, members of the Planning Commission. Today, we're going to have CAC Camac do a little briefing on the capital improvements plan. And one of the goals we'd like to have is some of your feedback on what you would like to see downtown as well as the other areas that he covers. We'd like to get a little direction, a little feedback on what direction we go before we start doing our 2025 comprehensive plan update. That will involve going out, finding consultants, and spending money, so we want to make sure we're hitting on the right targets before we get started. So that's one of our goals today as a staff. So thank you.
And then I could kind of add a little bit of an introduction here for economic development here. So our new economic development coordinator has a great presentation here. He's kind of got it briefed it down. When I heard it, it was about an hour and a half, so I think he's cut it in half here. And then also we've talked about giving an update to the council on his activity. So correlates with planning too. Economic development certainly is a major component of that. So it made sense to just go ahead and do those two updates together. So I think you've got some great topics to talk about and some great opportunity for you to provide input to staff. So appreciate that. So back to you, Mayor.
Thanks, Blaine. Thanks, David. Let's start off then with the first on our agenda, capital improvements plan, and it looks like we have our principal planner, Kak Kamak, to review the key projects. Welcome, Kak.
Thank you, Mayor. Kak Kamak, principal planner. It's great to see everybody at this joint meeting. I hope you can all hear me fine. If somebody can give me a thumbs up, that would be great.
You're coming loud and clear.
But yes, awesome. Okay. Great introduction. I think we should have more of these joint meetings, and I think we will have more opportunity in the years going forward for these joint meetings, because we are doing a major update to a comprehensive plan. And there's a lot of topics that I think we could save a lot of time on and save a lot of effort if we had joint meetings to discuss them as we move forward. So we can kind of look at this meeting and this workshop as something of a starting point for that. What I'd like to do today is to start at the capital improvements plan with some of the projects that are in there. And then my thought process is, how do we link these projects to the comprehensive plan? How do we link them to our comprehensive plan update? And where are there gaps that we could likely fill in our thought process? And how do we capture all of this in the plan as we move forward? So I have a short presentation, and I apologize for sending some material pretty late in the process. This is an idea that keeps evolving, and after tonight, I think it'll still evolve, because these are ideas that are at a very high level, 30,000 foot level. And these are ideas that generally create the scope for what we want to do over the next few years, 6 years in the CIP, and when it comes to the comp plan, over the next 20 years or even further, some of these ideas will carry over. So we'll start with the capital improvements plan, and I will share my screen for a presentation, and we'll follow along. I will try to make my presentation as brief as possible. We'd like to hear more from the council and planning commissioners on their ideas related to some of these projects that we're putting forth, so that we get a better direction moving forward. So with that, I'll switch to sharing my screen. All right. I'm guessing that you see a slide that says comprehensive plan downtown Marina.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to make sure I'm showing the right, I have 2 or 3 screens. I just want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, so I just termed this presentation Comprehensive Plan Downtown Marina because of what we have in our comprehensive plan docket for this year. And what we're about to talk, some of the ideas we're going to try and cover today may fit under this year's comprehensive plan amendments. Some of them may, and depending on our discussion, others may fit in the major update that's coming in a couple years in 2025. So we'll touch on some of those topics as we go by. So first we'll start with the CIP. So I have 3 projects that are somewhat related to each other and was the impetus for the discussion and the thought process here. So one is here we have a project here for the Marina Downtown Expansion Study. And this project was supposed to capture the interest that we have heard over the years and from City Council on wanting to redevelop downtown, wanting to use Marina as an asset, and looking at this combined area as an asset and what can we do to increase our economic development potential and character and culture of Oak Harbor. So currently, what is funded here is about $150,000 over 2 years, with more than 50% of the funding coming from grants. So our budget has about $25,000 this year and $25,000 next year, and so for a total of $150,000. So what does this, as currently this project is written, this talks about a redevelopment of the marina and downtown that could lead to an action plan. It talks about the 2 city-owned properties, which we'll go over in a little bit in another CIP project. And the project also describes about a programmatic SEPA. And a programmatic SEPA I'll give a short description of what that means when it comes to planning. What it means is basically you identify an area, you study it, you create a plan for it, and you do all the SEPA analysis for that area ahead of time based on the impacts it can create from full development. And you address those impacts in a programmatic way, or you capture those costs and you assign it back to development as it occurs. So what are the benefits of this? This programmatic SEPA approach then would allow development in this particular area to not have to do a separate SEPA analysis. The requirements will be upfront. Sometimes the costs are known upfront. So if there's a development idea or a development potential, they can come in for development, submit their development work, and because of this predetermined programmatic SEPA, they will know what they need to do in their project. It's not like you discover it while you're doing the project, you already know it, and so you try to address it in the design form. And if there are any impact fees and things like that that they have to pay, it's all known upfront. So that's what a programmatic SEPA helps with. The language is in the current scope of this project. However, these studies are a little bit extensive. If you're going to do them, you want to select an area that you want to get good coverage for, and that you can get some good return. So I think in the way that this project is currently budgeted for, we may be able to do a plan and try to get some direction, but to do a programmatic SEPA, I think, is going to cost a little extra. Even though the language and intent is there, we have to look at the scope to make sure that we can capture it all. So currently, these are some of the challenges with the existing project as written, and in terms of what we want to accomplish and what money we have in there. This is another CIP project that's in our current CIP, and this is for the 2 properties that the city owns. The city council was aware of these projects, and that these are basically sites that could be cleaned up. And since the city owns the site, you want to develop a plan or a study for the potential reuse of this lot. This is a key position for the city to have in this area, and what the city decides to do here could be a spark or critical in terms of the overall development of this area. So there's a lot of potential here. So as described in this current scope, it describes these sites as brownfield sites, talks about cleanup, and also includes a reuse and revitalization study. And this project is entirely dependent on grant funding, since there's no city budget dollars allocated to this. And then we have the third CIP project that I'd like to highlight, which is the state-mandated 2025 Comprehensive Plan Amendment. This is again partially funded. It has $25,000 this year and $25,000 next year from the city's general fund. And we're hoping to get some funds from maybe Department of Commerce, 50,000 this year and 50,000 next year, for a total of 150,000. And this is, as you know, Washington is a GMA, growth management state, which mandates updates to the comprehensive plan used to be every 7 years, and with COVID and economy, they have gone back and forth, but right now I think it's in the 8 to 10 year span. Our next update for our county and our city is 2025. And there's a lot of housing related mandates that the state has. In the past few years, they are coming up with a lot of requirements that cities and counties need to consider in order to update the comprehensive plan. And so in order to accomplish that task, this funding would be necessary to hire a consultant to try and compare our document with all the requirements and try to reconcile all the differences and incorporate what we're required to accommodate. So we'll have more discussion. This is a big update to the comprehensive plan, and we're hoping that over the next 2 years, we'll have a lot of opportunities for joint meetings such as this to talk about some of the ideas on the major update. But what I want to point out in this scope primarily is that it's written for the mandated requirements. I think the amount of money that's here in this project will capture the Department of Commerce's minimum requirements to meet state requirements. And we definitely want to have that happen. We want to be consistent with state requirements. And so this project will get us there. However, what it won't cover is all the other ideas that the community has. And they're not less important. They are, in fact, as important as the mandated items. And that's kind of what we want to talk about a little bit today. Anything that's above mandated requirements is the city's desire to move forward, and therefore funding for those should come from the city, or you try and seek out grants that that promote certain opportunities to provide for these plans and studies. And so it's a different strategy to try and accommodate the other plans that are not mandated. Such as redevelopment areas and things like that are local desires to be accommodated in the plan. So with these 3 CIP projects in place, we're trying to find a way to connect them to the comp plan update and try to capture some of the ideas that are out there in the community. The reason why we try and do this as planners is our regulations, our design guidelines, and everything that we require from the development world when it comes to development is rooted in our plans. And only if it's rooted in our plans and has a clear path to our plans will a regulation be held up by law. So there's a direct correlation between what we require from developers during an application and during the building permit process to what we have in our plans. And as planners, I'm trying to find a way to get the best link between our plans that we have for areas in the city and the regulations that we will eventually have that will guide development. So what are some of the ideas that we can consider in the next comprehensive plan related to these? And I'm trying to focus in this area, mainly in the downtown area or surrounding area, because that's where the interest is currently. So on this slide, what I basically have on the left is all the items that we have a budget for or we can address. So there's a downtown marina budget study, marina study. There's the 2-lot cleanup that we just talked about, the major update to the comprehensive plan. And if you remember, we also have wind general plan in the budget with projects being funded. What are some of the ideas that are out there that would be nice to have in the comprehensive plan that a lot of people probably think are key elements to redeveloping and providing life into some of our downtown areas or surrounding areas. So some of the popular ideas that I just categorize them. One is the West Pioneer Way, and we'll go into a little more. I'll show you on the map where this is, and this is the area that we're talking about between City Beach Street and Beeksma. The stretch of Pioneer Way that has the Ace Hardware and which had the bank building and so on. So that area has always been an area of interest to the community. There's been talk about whether it should be a continuation of downtown. There's been talk about road diets. There's always been some interest in trying to redevelop that area, which is adjacent to Windjammer Park. So that's one kind of area that, one idea that has been talked about in the community in the recent times and in several years. Then we have the Central Oak Harbor Redevelopment District, and I'll go into a map in my next slide. And this is the area that is kind of in a triangle between Highway SR20, Regatta Drive, and Pioneer Way. So if you can imagine that triangle, that area has always been talked about as a potential for redevelopment because of all the public facilities such as parks and schools that are there along with the highway, and how it can provide access to a lot of our residential areas and services to the residential areas. Another popular idea that's always been talked about is how to connect the marina with downtown. Why we think that there's a separation now between downtown and the marina is mainly the residential land uses that are in between. And so is there a way to try and connect all of these areas so that they are not so distinct? Maybe there's a potential there. There's also the idea of improving the connection between the marina and downtown, and the Marina Trail has come up as an idea and has always been on the upfront in the plan in terms of pursuing some sort of enhanced connection. We don't have a specific plan for that. There's a lot of ideas on that, but that's something that we can kind of work with in the downtown marina study that we budgeted. So that's there. And then we have a plan for the shoreline. And I'm not talking about the shoreline master program that talks mainly about the land uses and the structures that could be permitted there, but a plan for the actual shoreline, its improvements. I think there's some study and effort to try and look at that and see how that shoreline, all along that shoreline, which is mostly public, which is a great benefit, how the entire shoreline can work for cover. So these are some of the ideas that are out there that are not properly captured in our comp plan. And so with these projects that we have in the CIP and with some of the ideas that we have out in the community, trying to float some ideas on how we can try and bridge the gap and bring it into our plans that's which is straightforward, easy to understand, and easy to implement. So looking at a map, I'm a graphical person, and so I'd like to look at it from a graphic standpoint to see how some of these districts connect. So what you're seeing here is the map, a future land use map. This is an excerpt from our future land use map. I don't have the legend here, but the yellow is low density, the orange is medium density, the blue is public facilities, the purple is central business district, and the red is commercial. So as you can see in on our land use map, current land use map, there is a dotted line around this purple area. And this dotted line is what represents the central business district. And it's called central business district, it's not called downtown. I think when people think of downtown, it differs in everybody's mind in terms of what downtown is, in terms of boundary. So, but nevertheless, we have this dotted line that encompasses the central business district and therefore gives us the direct link to the regulations that we have for it. But other than that, what do we have? So we have the Windjammer Park, and we have a separate plan for that. The boundaries for that are described, and we did that with our treatment plant redevelopment, and we developed the entire park. So there's an existing plan for that. What else do we have in this area? We have the marina, and then we have, the marina has its own redevelopment plan. There's an adopted plan for that. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about connections. We talked about the trail connections as an idea that could be looked at. We talked about, there's been thoughts about connecting downtown to the marina via the water. Not sure how popular that idea is, but I just wanted to throw that out there in terms of the desire to connect all of these areas into one sort of cohesive district. There's also the area we talked about, the housing area, which is mainly zoned for higher density, that connects the central business district with the marina, which could be interesting to look at and see what options you can have to tie some of these areas together. And then, of course, we have the West Pioneer Way district, which I think there's been some recent thought process on its connection to downtown, and how, in a way of thinking, instead of trying to find a way to get Highway 20 and all its interest to downtown, the thought is, can you extend downtown to the highway? And this district here could potentially sort of bridge the gap if we look at it as a unique district that's connecting the two, and try and develop some policies or a plan to allow for redevelopment that makes it more attractive and gives a downtown feel, so that downtown doesn't feel so separated from the highway. So these are some of the general ideas from a geographical and a map perspective that wanted to put graphically to see how they all connect with each other. Other ideas that have been floated around are redevelopment areas, and this is, of course, this idea of redeveloping the area I'm talking about, where you have Pioneer Way, you have downtown, then you have highway, and there's a mix of uses here that is primed for redevelopment and can potentially be of higher density and use the services that are available in the area more efficiently. And they also, it's such a nice area that has access to highway commercial, midway commercial, and downtown. So there is a lot of potential in this area, and this could be looked at as a redevelopment area. And this idea has also been floated around in the past years, and it would be nice to capture it in our comp plan. However, currently there's no CIP project or anything related. I was just bringing this up since we're talking about downtown, we're talking about the surrounding areas, and just all the ideas that have come up in the recent past. If you look at this area, it is similar to the Opportunity Zone, and I think Council is familiar with that. This is a federal program. Their boundaries are based on the census tract, and it is similar to the redevelopment area if we would consider one. But not to the same extent. The Opportunity Zone and its regulations, so its incentives are valid only for 10 years, and not sure currently if they'll extend it or if they'll change it or if it'll go away. But what Oak Harbor can adopt, if it does have a redevelopment area, will last much longer than what the Opportunity Zone will last in terms of policies or incentives and so on. So this is an idea that in order to redevelop the area so that you can upgrade most of the utilities, because most of the utilities here are aging and could likely be likely candidate for upgrades. So how do we tie these ideas into the comp plan? What would be the best way to do it? So in asking those questions in our mind and internally, we looked into the comprehensive plan, and this is, if anybody was here with the 2016 major update of the comprehensive plan will remember this. But the city's comprehensive plan has the city of Oak Harbor divided into neighborhoods. And this was an idea that was brought forward in 2016 and done as part of the major update. And it was done with the idea to promote for redevelopment, basically, like what we're considering right now. These neighborhoods were created sort of loosely, in the sense that these boundaries where they are were not, vetted with technical data. However, there is some pattern here. And I want to give kudos to our senior planner, Ray Lindenberg. He was the architect of most of this work. He has a keen eye for patterns, I think. And most of these districts were basically done either through form in terms of building types or style or layout or time era. Some of these, so these districts have a little bit of these criteria overlapping in order to create these districts. And because we had a lot of policies in the old comprehensive plan that addressed a lot of concerns and was loosely written in terms of where they are happening and so on. What this categorization allowed us to do is to capture area-specific issues and also set the pathway or pave the way for future redevelopment plans and so on. And I think this idea, if maintained in the comprehensive plan, will serve the community for many years, 50 years or even more, because after this, we are currently now just stumbling upon its potential. If we do go about redeveloping areas in town, it would be nice to have a relationship to this map and try to have plans that somehow capture these neighborhoods that we have. Now, the loosely part of the boundary is, and I say loosely, and I think Ray will be supportive of this, is to consider minor modifications to these boundaries based on current land uses or current changes. These were done in 2016. These were done with the idea of what was there on the ground, or maybe what was considered as uses at that time. But some of these could be amended to accommodate more details if needed. So if we look, so this is a great basis. We already have this in the comprehensive plan, and this could be used as a foundation for area-specific plans, which could then lead to regulations that could be implemented. So in the previous map where I was showing, we have the CBD district and the Windjammer Park and the connections in the marina. If you look at this district, what is termed as Old Town, and I think this is selected mainly because this area encompasses most of the areas. I don't want to say it exactly follows the first city boundaries, but it was first incorporated, but it is pretty close to that. And so that's why it's called Old Town. And I think that's a name that rhymes with a lot of existing citizens of residents. And it's something that I think kind of roots it in history. So one of the ideas that we could consider moving forward is to have a plan for Old Town, which includes all of the plans that were talked about, the Windjammer plan, the marina, the downtown connections, and any policies or any ideas in terms of redevelopment of these areas could all be looked at if we look at cohesively a plan for Old Town. So instead of isolating it as downtowns and having a plan for that, and isolating Windjammer Park, we can look at it. We can still have those plans, can still have those details, but we can also cohesively bring them together in an Old Town plan if desired. So that's one idea. Now, if you look at this, we don't have the West Pioneer Way area in this old town. If the city council desires and if the planning commission desires, we can definitely change that. We can take that area and we can add it to the old town area, and I think the community would be supportive of that. Currently, that area is in a district called the Byway District because of the uses that were there in 2016 that mirrored some of the uses along the stretch. However, I think, again, for planning purposes and for redevelopment purposes. So if you ask me what is redevelopment, redevelopment is when you take an area and you have policies and regulations that are different than what the current regulations are projecting, right? So you want to kind of redevelop it by changing some of the requirements and so on, and that's how you redevelop an area over time. And so if we wanted to redevelop this area to something different, we could do it by changing it and putting it in Old Town, and that change will slowly over the years change how things are implemented in this area. So that's one idea to consider. The other idea is, again, as part of the neighborhoods, we have what's called Midtown, and it captures the residential areas north of Pioneer Way and the downtown shops, and where it has the school district and the park district and low density. And this is definitely a candidate where there are lots and so on that could accommodate more density, and having a very planned approach to it could be helpful for redevelopment potential and for future regulations. And this combined with modern Midway, which has the Midway corridor and all its residential, all its commercial uses. Then we have this large mostly single-family residential here, which is part of modern Midway. Now, you can look at this part of the area, and you could say that you may not see much changes in the next 20 years, but from an infrastructure-wise, you may look at possibilities here, because if you look at some of the changes that can occur along Regatta, maybe a new school, new development, there is potential for some infrastructure connections to our schools and other public facilities here that could use some planning. So the idea of so we basically want to see what the council and the commission think about, trying to look at this, geographically as a larger area, calling it an old town, and trying to look at it from a broader perspective and planning for the area in that way. And so for the old town, we actually have some plans already in place, and we have some money in place to look at some pieces. If we want to consider this idea, we'd have to kind of change the scope a little bit of how we approach it. Maybe even look at some additional resources to see how we want to study this area. So that's one idea that's out there. And then this redevelopment area of Midway. Again, we have no funding for this other than we have a CIP project to redevelop or do a road diet for the Midway Boulevard. I think it's 6 years out. But if we're looking for redevelopment areas, I think these two areas, they can either be combined into one area, or you can have a plan for these two areas, and you can have policies that are separate for Midtown and modern Midway. And there's nothing wrong, and I'll tell this now, there's nothing wrong in having a plan that doesn't match these boundaries. So if you want to have a plan that just has Midway and some of these uses around here in order to redevelop Midway, you can do that. There's nothing wrong in it. Just for us planners and for bookkeepers, so to speak, it's nice if we have these boundaries match up. They allow for less loopholes, less gray areas, less interpretations, and allows for cleaner regulations in the long run. if they have some overlap and consistency between them, and that's what we always try to achieve. But it always doesn't happen that way. Interests over the years can change, and budgets can change, and so we are completely understanding of those realities. But these are right now an idea stage. And, if we want to consider them moving forward with either some of our comprehensive plan amendments this year or for the 2025, based on our discussion here, we can try and tackle some of that. So these are some of the ideas that have come up from those 3 CIP projects that are currently in our budget. So just to have to initiate discussion or to just get the thoughts flowing, I have just some questions to think about. Should we change the scope of our current projects that we currently have to try and capture some of this? If the answer is yes, then we can start working on that and start amending that. If you think that, no, they should be as they are, we can work with that as well. We can still capture some of the bigger ideas in our 2025 comprehensive plan update. And any feedback and thoughts on what the ideas of the Old Town Plan or the Midway redevelopment will get us a better understanding of what the council and the commission is thinking, and as we move forward, based on your comments and thoughts, we can make adjustments. So with that, I will stop and I will turn it back to the mayor, council, and the commission for thoughts, comments, questions, etc.
Thank you, CAC. A lot to think about there. I have a couple of questions and at least a statement to start off. The opportunity zone, which we tried to get more information on when it was first established here. I'm not aware of any property owners in that zone who have taken advantage of the opportunities that come with that. Do we know if any kind of a follow-up has been done on the opportunity zones elsewhere in our surrounding communities and how they've worked in favor of the property owners and/or the cities where they were established? Do we have more information on opportunity zones? And I'm not expecting anybody really to be put on the spot on this unless you've got knowledge and education that are about that opportunity. Are you aware of the opportunity zone successes?
I am not very familiar with that topic, but I do have support staff with me, and I see Ray has come online.
I see Ray there too. Great.
And he may have more information on that.
Welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. I think and then this is based on very limited knowledge that I have myself, so do take this with a little grain of salt. But my understanding of the opportunity zone was it was kind of intended for or designed to be a hands-off situation for the jurisdictions, that we are not intended to have a lot to do with it. It goes through private property owners and through private accounting practices and tax reporting and all that sort of thing. So I am not aware of any new projects that have gone on in the opportunity zone because of the opportunity zone, and haven't really reached out to anybody, any of our neighbor jurisdictions regarding that to see if anything's happened. And I don't know that there's anything, necessarily wrong, in quotes, as far as things not happening. I think that just the opportunity zone, unfortunately, was outlined by a census tract, which didn't make a ton of sense from the standpoint of being where, things might naturally want to develop anyway. it was determined, that census tract was determined based on economic statistics based from the census itself. So I can't really give you a lot of information other than that, to be honest.
I hope they're working better elsewhere than what that has done around here. But perhaps we could go to the state and ask them for some additional information. So thank you for that.
Mayor, I can provide a little bit more
Okay.
on opportunity zones too. Reiterating, one of the challenges was mentioned here by our planners is that this was a federal-driven program and it was a tax credit with the IRS. And so we really don't see the investment area in it, and so we can't really tell what's going on with it. I think we used our Economic Development Council of Island County to promote it. So I think that it gave us ideas, we brought a lot of people together, and I think some of the ideas we have here may not be from the opportunity zone, but it really started the thinking about areas that we need to focus on. So I think it did initiate some synergy there on the local side on promoting it, but it was really Wall Street money and a little bit too complicated to deal with. I think we're looking for city areas with other programs that we have with our multifamily tax credit and some other things that we have locally that'll address it. And I'm not aware of it really in following this through. My understanding, my association with the Economic Development Council of Island County of really taking off anywhere in the nation the way it was intended to do here. But it did kind of get an outgrowth, and I just kind of wanted to reiterate here at the tail end of our planners discussion here is it did start some discussion here, and we had a lot of internal discussion here with staff that kind of drove in this, and it's kind of a combination of some of these areas have old infrastructure and Public Works kind of has that perspective of how do we deal with that, and we had long-term planning for our Public Works director was talking about that, and how do we integrate that into development and redevelopment, and what do we focus on. So these concepts were kind of all put together here and brought out for your understanding and your input to kind of put it all together. But I think it was a great collaborative effort between departments and teamwork here in putting this together. And it'll certainly correlate with our economic development coordinator, who will kind of reiterate, and some of his stuff are already covered here because a lot of it overlaps. And so in the CIP, just what was done was taken out was the ideas that were economic development related here. So we certainly have a lot of other projects. And so this kind of took those three capital projects and tried to put them together and how we kind of get synergy and get redevelopment, certainly in the downtown, and then some of our older areas, and then get the benefit of being able to update our infrastructure at the same time.
Okay, I'll turn to anybody in the audience. Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. I think AWC, Association of Washington Cities, keeps track of things like that, and I think there was a big push in all the different cities and towns and stuff. So just a call to them and to their staff that they could let you know pretty quickly what cities did or towns used it or not, or the fallback from it. Why it didn't work. I mean, they keep track of that, and their ideas to push cities and how to redevelop. I mean, they pushed the information for brownfield zones and for other things. So be a place to start.
Okay, yes, Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. CAC, great presentation. Thank you. And thanks, Ray, for the breakdown of the, kind of the city neighborhoods. I think that's a fantastic discussion tool moving forward, right? And I think each time as we're updating our capital improvement plan, I think we can gander back at that map and kind of look and say, okay, is there something or an opportunity in this neighborhood and in this neighborhood, right? And now we're looking at these 10, 12 different neighborhoods in our city, and I think it's just a great thinking tool. right? So I really appreciate that. And yeah, as far as West Pioneer Way, to try and answer your questions, 'cause I have a lot of thoughts, right, on all of this. But to answer your questions, West Pioneer Way is the gateway to Old Town. And the reality is, Old Town can be all it wants to be when the people come downtown and support it, right? And one of the ways people are going to come downtown to support it is to want to come downtown. And if you notice Anacortes, how it's configured, and I think it's just a very fitting example where the highway makes the turn to go to the ferry. That's where their arch is at. That's their gateway to their Old Town is, right? And something that says, go straight. Don't take this left turn, right? And we've got the exact same configuration coming down the hill, right? The people have a choice of either going straight or taking a left turn. Coming southbound, obviously they have the choice of taking that right turn or taking a left turn into our downtown. And I think one of the easiest ways, quite frankly, to solve that is through a road diet and to look at this as part of our comp plan. I think there is an opportunity to expand what we already have in the comp plan involving, downtown redevelopment and understanding that part of downtown redevelopment is getting people downtown, and that's part of what we can do as a city, right? The businesses have to stand on their own. The businesses have to do what the businesses have to do down there, but we can assist that traffic flow, and we can assist, the direction people want to go when they're coming down that hill by making West Pioneer Way look more inviting. And a road diet, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, would mean converting that to a two-lane street with pull-in parking, right? So that when people are coming down the hill, they see an inviting place, plenty of available parking, looks pedestrian-friendly. You could have some planting strips and some outcrops, similar to what we have downtown. And that way it looks like it's the beginning of downtown, and of course it's the gateway to our park. It's the gateway to a lot of stuff. So certainly incorporating that section into the Old Town discussion, I think, is integral in the planning of what the future happens with Old Town. Going back to the CIP project with the newly acquired buildings down there, the old gas station and the one next door, I think the brick building's a goner, unfortunately. I think it just was, substandard construction, and you see lots of damage in the mortars. I'm certainly not an engineer, but it doesn't take an engineer, I think, to look at that building and say that it's gone. But, the old gas station, which is an icon of our downtown, looks to me in pretty darn good shape. The mortar looks like it's in good shape, and, I think we had the traffic downtown, and we had the business downtown, and we had the occupancy rate downtown. There's a great opportunity for a public-private partnership in which a private investor would want to come in and rehab that building and turn it into something which, once we start that rolling, once we start that investment in downtown and people building and remodeling, and it gets infectious, right? And that's what we see in other towns, and that could be that incubator. It could be it's got an outdoor restroom. It could be that public restroom facility we're missing in our downtown, while having a private investor in there building that out. And again, that all gets solved by having people come downtown, right, and getting people downtown. So that's my thoughts on Old Town. On the Midway deal, yeah, I think there's all sorts of opportunity in Midway. That's the center of our town, and I think there's some synergy conversation, long-term, far-out planning, with us in the school district. There's been conversation for years about working with the school district to maybe move their bus barn out by the city shop, get them out of the center of town. That would, free up some area for maybe some additional park space in the center of our town or some sort of redevelopment. There's a couple of large parcels, up there on Midway that are undeveloped, and what would we like to see that end up like? And as a city, we're the drivers behind that. We either that or it just happens. And then finally, just to wrap up the marina, in my mind, it's the huge thing that could happen here is, as we're going through these discussions of dredging, is looking at the creation of a true breakwater out there where there used to be one. It was a point of discussion that we had back in D.C. with the Army Corps of Engineers. It's certainly something we're we're conscious of, and why would that be the big defining factor? Because if we created that breakwater, number one, we'd have a beautiful breakwater trail, right? I mean, any city you've ever been to that has a large breakwater sticking on the water is just awesome to walk out there. So it certainly would be a draw for people to come down to our downtown. But at the same time, it would protect our inner harbor. It would create a true harbor, and it would create the opportunities for things such as our mini harbor staying in year-round and not being damaged. A water taxi service possibly could be our first connecting service between the marina and our downtown. It would be very easy to operate. There's people who live there at the marina who I'm sure would love to operate that service and be on call for that water taxi. And you know, so I think that's the big drive for the Marina CAC is and I know you guys are looking for direction, right? So I'm trying to be as clear as I can and help with that. Is that breakwater? There was one there back prior to 1941. It was removed in order to get the seaplanes in and out, and the reconstruction of that and creation of a true inner harbor, I think, is the key to all future marina expansion and talk of what that marina can do for our city moving forward long term for our kids and our grandkids. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree wholeheartedly with all of Councilor Wiesner's thoughts. For sure, there's a lot of really specific spaces with specific potential. To speak to the West Pioneer, the Old Town expansion development, I was just riding my bike down Pioneer just the other day and was thinking to myself, do we really need 4 lanes in this spot? Is it necessary to have 4 lanes? And would it be possible to do a road diet with 2 lanes? And I was thinking bike lanes. You know, parking is also an option. But I do think that we have an opportunity to treat that specific section of Pioneer as kind of a gateway, if not Old Town, a gateway district to Old Town. And I think that there's a good opportunity to partner with the Main Street Association and the Arts Commission to get some kind of an arch or a physical gateway, something really big and bold and visual that lets people know that, you know, all of the things are just down the road. So I'm not sure how that kind of partnership would work. I know that that's been something that both the Main Street and the Arts Commission has been kicking around for probably 10 years or so. But I would really like to see something like that get off the ground because it would make it more welcoming and, you know, make it obvious. And yeah, I have some other thoughts, but I'll circle back to those later. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Councilor Wiesner, thanks for the passionate tour of the town there. You know, it doesn't take much vision to see the untapped potential from Highway 20 all the way to the marina and up Midway, like Councilor Wiesner was discussing. Basically, CAC staff, if you're looking for direction, a lot of what I had wrote down and had thought about saying, Jim and Tara hit pretty well, so thank you.
So I don't mean to just stay here at council. Anybody? Yes, Mr. CHAZAR.
Well, thank you. The first thing that came to mind was an old saying that, how do you eat an elephant? And one piece at a time, as I was going through CAC's presentation. I'm very happy to hear about West Pioneer and the gateways and everything else. I know this has been a discussion for a long, long time. Several mayors ago tried to get Oak Harbor Motors to move, okay? And he said, well, give me $5 million and I'll move. Okay, so we can do anything with money. But I'm glad to hear that's absolutely 100% what I believe, that is the gateway to the downtown, just like in Anacortes, as you pointed out. You know, I lived through Hurricane Katrina, and we had actually a lot easier than we have it here in Oak Harbor. We had a clean slate, okay? Mother Nature wiped everything out. And so we engaged charrettes, and not only with the business communities, but also with the residential communities. And we saw the chamber, which I happen to be president of, spearhead all those charrettes to figure out what, in our case, what this elephant's supposed to look like. And so what does the downtown business district want it to look like? Hopefully it's better than what it looks like now. It is thousands and thousands of times better than it was 30 years ago. I know that. As a citizen and possibly planning commissioner also, it's frustrating to know that we could possibly have a transient dock next to downtown, like they have in LaConner, like they have in Coopville, like they have in Langley, not so much Langley, but Coopville and LaConner. I see the potential of downtown Oak Harbor being better than LaConner. It's off the beaten path. Okay, we're not off the beaten path. We have substantial amount of residential, and in the summertime, lots of tourists here. And what we always hear is we want lower taxes. We want lower taxes. So the easiest way to lower taxes is to get someone else to pay our taxes for us, and that's tourism. And so I'd love to see that district with the 2 buildings you bought and land be purposed into something that would create more tourism and possibly even more downtown residential, as we're seeing in a lot of communities with the millennials living upstairs with businesses downstairs. But the one thing that I've seen from being on the Planning Commission is how much public engagement do we have in saying, what is this supposed to look like? Okay, obviously the businesses should have that. Again, it's just money, right? That's all it is. We got lots of it, don't we? But it's one piece at a time. But I'd love to see the chamber, okay, be involved in this also, as far as assisting the city council and the planning commission and the city in giving direction on which way we want to go as well. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. Great. Good to hear. Anyone else? Councilor Munz?
Thank you, Mayor. Do we still have at least a line item for the pier? I mean, Helen Chatfield Weeks spent, that was like a 10-year, 12-year, and I thought that past finance director just left a line item. So if it ever came back, we could put money into it. But I know that when we were looking at Wally Funk, if we had built a building that could be used as a community there on what we call Flintstone Freeway, as a wait station for the mosquito fleet, actually did some tours, take you from here down to Coopville to Langley and then across. It was just a walk-aboard, and he was going to donate a lot of his photographs to be on loan to the city. I mean, so there's been some great things. We just haven't ever got the money that we needed at the time. West Pioneer, it would be great. We talked at one time getting a roundabout there and then putting a small windmill there and then with the signage. So there's been some ideas kicked around. We just need to settle on it and then get building one thing at a time, one leg at a time or toe at a time for this elephant. So anyway, but great job, staff. Thank you very, very much. I like the color zones and easy to think about combining it and stuff. So thank you very much.
So I think I can answer the line item versus money question about a pier. I don't believe there's any money anywhere in the city that's being held or planned for a pier that I know of. Now, line item doesn't mean much without money, but I will ask our finance director to look into that a little bit. So when I first got on city council, I come from the title insurance industry, and I knew that the city owned the tidelands in front of Flintstone Park, or I think that's the correct park name down there. And now that we've acquired these 2 buildings, we've acquired the tidelands in front of those, which is more than we own at the marina. We don't own the tidelands under our marina, unfortunately, but I wanted to move the marina. But it turned out to be too expensive. And, today, now we're talking about just connecting, some ways to connect. when the first people came to me to discuss buying these two properties, I don't take that lightly, to take property into a municipality and off of the tax rolls. So it was a kind of a hard sell at first at my desk. But when I looked at the fact that nobody else was able to make that property work because of the cleanup requirements, and we can do that. And it gets a little complicated, but the brownfield opportunity is something that is available to cities, and we will clean that property up. Now, what we're going to do with it is your people's decision. You know, I mean, it belonged to the city of Oak Harbor and the tidelands in front of it too. So what can we do with it that's a huge opportunity, I see. That's, you know, only a small part of Old Town, I guess, but not necessarily. I mean, that could be a draw, and I hope that your thoughts going forward about help us decide what we're going to do with it, because we don't have a plan other than to get it cleaned up. And then, you know, we need to put the best thing on there that we can decide, you know, what's it going to be. So be thinking about that, please. Help us. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me, I'm sorry. To piggyback off that and Mr. Wiesner's comments about the old gas station, you know, that really, again, that could be an opportunity to partner with the Chamber of Commerce or the Main Street. It's right there on that side of the road. You pull in. For years, I've always thought that would be a perfect place for kayak rental or stand-up paddleboard rental or something. You just pull in, load up your car, go. There could be information center, restrooms, concessions, depending on what we end up doing with that corner. There's some excellent tie-in. For the Planning Commission and CAC, I don't know if you can answer this, but several years ago, we were having a conversation about horizontal mixed use, and one of the things that came up was, it's an image that I can't get out of my head, and it was the possibility of having mixed use, commercial and residential in the CBD, like those, you know, John CHAZZAR mentioned the car lot, the Oak Harbor Motors. There's all of that back lot, that concrete that fronts Windjammer Park that isn't being used. And I mean, I'm picturing a line of condos there in that back lot that nobody's doing anything with, that fronts the park, and that would still allow plenty of commercial space actually fronting the street in the central business district. Is that something that that would be allowable per current zoning, or is that just kind of a future dream?
The short answer is, I think, yes, it is allowable, but I see Ray, he did the text amendment and will be able to fill you in on details, but I think the answer is yes.
Yes, Councilor Heisen, I think that from my standpoint, when I was looking at doing that ordinance, that was one of three properties that I actually had in mind for exactly what you're talking about. The way the ordinance is written is we reserve the first 100 feet from the street frontage for commercial on the first floor. You can do a mixed-use building on the frontage there, but that allows for just residential to be quote-unquote on that back portion, like you're saying, closer to Windjammer Park. But that was one of three parcels that I actually specifically was looking at to apply that to.
Since you presented that years ago, and, you know, again, there's so much opportunity. We need money. I look at that marina, I think, what I couldn't do at $200 million. That's all we need. But yeah, good. Okay, thank you for letting me know that that's actually a possibility. I'd like to see somebody pursue that. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next. Oh, yes, Mr. Plumlee.
Thank you, Mayor. I heard a lot of good things about what we could do down there, but I'd like to propose that we bring more groups into this discussion. You know, Maggie and the Chamber Margaret and Main Street. I work with them down there, and they do phenomenal. But I think they need some help. I think we should be looking at WorkSource. I think we should be looking at maybe the local college. We should be looking at the economic development, RAIN, those organizations, because the reality is when we do build whatever we're going to build down there, we have to have people to work it. And to work it, they have to be able to live here in this community. And they have to have the skills, and those jobs have to pay them even during the winter months when tourism isn't a possibility to keep things open. I can tell you that when I'm down there, down on Pioneer during the wintertime, almost every business down there is closed more than they're open. And in the summertime, when we have events, many of them close because their business isn't tourist related. So regardless of what we do or how we get the money, what it ultimately becomes, I just would hope that we can bring in some of those organizations that can help the community provide the labor and the human capital that's going to make that successful. Thank you.
Excellent point.
Thank you. Okay. Well, this next topic is the flow of money. How local economies work, economic development, and I think our economic coordinator, Mr. McCaslin, is headed towards the podium there. Welcome, Steve, and take it away.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Commissioners, and of course, staff and the public for being here today. I'm Steve McCaslin. I don't really need this microphone. My voice will project, but I'm the Economic Development Coordinator, been on board for about 4.5 months, and today I want to talk about how local economies work. And this whole discussion right here answers what my next slide. Once I get the slide to move. Am I on? Did it go off? I might turn it on. Is that the button up top? Thank you. Now let's see if it's going. There we go. Economic development touches just about everything. And the more we understand about how economies work, the better decisions we can make for the things we're trying to do. So that was a great segue into a slide that I made like 3 weeks ago, not even knowing. So here's what, first off, thanks for having me here today. And I think this will be of value. I hope you guys can see this back there, or if you have screens or something. Generally, I try to hold questions till the end, but if you have a question that's just burning, jump in and we'll take care of it. The purpose or the objective of all this right here, there are 3 things in here. First off, is to enable elected officials, commissioners, staff, city staff, partners, all the stakeholders that are going to be involved in what we're doing from an economic development perspective, to have a baseline understanding of how local economies work and how they grow. And if we do that, then we can work better together to create that robust, resilient economy that we're trying to do and raise the standard of living for the people that live here. So real short background on how I got here. I came here in March of '83 to be trained to fly in the A6 Intruder. I did that for a career. Then I went into the corporate world, various jobs there. Hewlett-Packard was the first company I went to across the line there. In 2013, I started my own consulting group focused on 3 main areas: business consulting, leadership development, and corporate training. 2015, we moved our family back here to finish raising the kids, take care of my mother-in-law, 93 and a half. The only thing she doesn't do that she did 8 years ago is drive. Everything else she still does great, so it's been good for her, it's been good for us, and we're glad to be back in Oak Harbor. For the last 3.5 years of this time, though, one of my clients was the Economic Development Council for Island County, so I did all of the economic and the demographic research and reporting for them. And that's the journey that led me here today in front of you guys. So here's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go, if CAC said he was at 30,000 feet, I'm going to be up at 50,000 feet, but I'm going to be in an SR-71. So I'm going to be going faster. If you need me to throttle back a little bit, let me know. I'll slow it down. But I think I'm going to try and respect the time, and we're going to set the stage. Then we're going to talk about what a local economy is, how they work, how they grow, how we improve one, what economic development is in relation to all that, what types of business should we go for. Then I'm going to talk about 2 important issues, a summary, then I'm going to talk about an unavoidable truth, and then I'll have a few slides. Although Kat covered a lot of what I was going to say, as Blaine already said, on my activities, but I've been involved in a lot of that, so He probably saved you 5 minutes of time, so that'll be good. Thank you, CAC. So let's set the stage. How many of you follow the national news on a daily basis, either TV, internet, or whatever? Just about everyone in here? Right. So what do you see? Unemployment is going to be up or down. Housing prices down nationally. But the truth is, what happens at that level right there at the national level can have little similarity to what goes on in the thousands of economies around the nation. From 2014 to 2018, average annual job growth at the national level was 1.73%. But 77 of the 3,100 plus counties in the nation had higher growth. In fact, Island County was about 6 times that at 11.9% growth in jobs. But 85% of the counties or so lost jobs. In 2021, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, national unemployment at the national level was 3.9%. But Yuma, Arizona was about 3 times that at 12.9%. I picked Yuma because it's similar to Oak Harbor. It's a Marine Corps air station, which is not quite as good as Naval Air, but still, it's an air station, military base, and a town around it. College town in the middle of Iowa, though, was 25% less unemployment than the national average. And Oak Harbor was just about close to it at 4.2%. So what this tells us, all there is the local health of our economy is going to affect our lives way more than we see on the national news and the trends that we watch every night. Leads to the question, though, when you look at those things that I just showed you, why is it some communities do better than others? First off, there's not a single answer to it because we're all different communities. But the more we understand about how local economies work, how they grow, how money flows into our area, how money flows out of the area, and what causes all of that to happen, we'll be able to do better. We also need to understand the difference between the growth in our economy in size or volume and also in quality, and we'll talk about both of those. And then we'll talk about a couple of characteristics of strong economies, and then we'll talk about some characteristics of weak economies. And speaking of which, what is a local economy? If you put it in its simplest terms, it's a geographic area where the people lives and works. That's it. But there's a boundary to it, which is determined by, anyone want to guess? Except for those two that already know the answer. Commuting patterns. How far people commute. The size of our economy will be determined by jobs, both the location and the number of jobs that are out there. Because job centers, they're like magnets. They'll pull you in. The closer you are, the more the pull. The farther away you are from it, the less the pull until there's no pull at all, or a pull from another job center is pulling you stronger than our job center will. So what it means is our local economy isn't limited in size by the Oak Harbor city limits, county lines, or state lines. For the most part, if 75% of the people live and work in an area, it's considered a contained economy. So now that's what our local economy is. Let's talk about how they work. So I want you to imagine that all the money in Oak Harbor sits in this bucket right here, all the wealth. And it swirls around and around as if that blender up there is spinning it. It goes from person to person, it goes from business to business, it goes from person to business. The money's constantly moving. Let's say I buy a house and take out a bank loan. Well, now the loan officer buys a TV. That salesperson now buys a stereo. That store owner now makes an insurance payment. The insurance agent pays property tax bill, and a teacher pays a water bill. And the money moves around and around and around and around and around. And that's how it goes. But there's a hole in the bucket. A lot of holes in the bucket. And the wealth of the economy leaks out. Every time you purchase a shirt, basically anytime you buy anything that's not locally, whether it's a product or a service, it's not locally sourced, money leaves the community and goes to wherever the product was made or wherever the service was delivered. It's continuously leaving the community. The outward flow is constant, and there's nothing you can do about it. But there is something we can do, not about the outward flow, but we can replenish the bucket. So what we do is we put a faucet up here at the top. And it fills that bucket back up, brings fresh wealth back into it, mind your way? Can you see it? Okay, good. I feel like every time I do this. Okay, gotcha. Which enables that churn. That circle I had with where that money moves around, that's called the churn, all those transactions. Money mainly comes into an area through the business activity of what were known as primary or contributory industries. A primary business sells its good or service outside of the local area. That money comes back in, and the fresh wealth now goes back into the area, fills that bucket up. So, like this. A manufacturer sells equipment somewhere, money comes back here. An engineer designs a bridge in another state, money comes back here. Now, this could be anyone, government, nonprofit, profit, but if you secure a state or federal grant, money comes back into the local area. And that money then becomes mixed and churned in that bucket. It ripples and multiplies, and eventually it's consumed and drained out through those holes in the bucket again. It's that churning process that I described, that blender going around and around, that generates most of the jobs in our community. For the most part, a business either contributes or it consumes. If it's not dependent upon the local market for its revenue, then it's considered primary in nature and it's a wealth contributor. So for us, Navy, think TSI, think IDEX, probably some of the bigger construction groups out there could be there, but those first three that I named are probably the biggest ones that we have here. But you could have 3,000 people with an Etsy shop in their garage, and if you were able to put all that together, you'd have the same thing, because most of those people are selling stuff outside of here too. The vast majority of businesses, though, in any economy, about 95% of them are consumptive in nature. They depend on that money that comes in from the primary businesses. That's most of your retail stores, service companies, restaurants, banks, lawyers, doctors. Us. We're a consumptive enterprise. We depend on local money to do what we do for the people that put us where we are. So our local economy, with all these consumptive businesses, will grow or decline in direct proportion to the amount of money that's imported back into the area by those primary industries. That's why when you see an expanding retail sector, it's the result of a growing economy, not the cause of it. So these primary industries have what they call a multiplier effect, and I think you're going to like this next one. So this is a study. It's in the PDF that you got, the flow of money, but it was done by the same company for a community in Florida. The annual economic impact of a pharmaceutical manufacturing company with 500 people averaging $67,500 in average wages. From a money perspective, 164 million plus in payroll, almost 2,000 more households able to be supported, 17.5 million more in city taxes, local taxes, $109 plus million in retail sales, and $420 in transactions, the churn. Did I see you?
Somebody went by.
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought I saw a hand go up there. But not just the money side of it, there's the multiplier effect. Almost 2,000 more jobs because of that in these various industries out there. So these primary industries are important, and I'm focusing on primary in this because those are the ones that bring the wealth in. The others are still important to us because we still have to be able to take care of the people here, but you can see now why the primary industries are the ones that are really going to bring the wealth in. And not all of them are the same. Not all primary industries are created equal. Some have a greater effect than others. That's just the way they are, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So how do local economies grow? The increase, I said it before, the increase or size of an economy is going to grow in direct proportion to the amount of money that these primary industries bring into us. But it needs to be consistent, because economic growth requires that rate of money coming into our economy to be consistent. And if it is, that churning activity will be steady and regular. And then what happens is businesses and residents can count on certain things happening and make better financial decisions for their future. But if that flow is disrupted, slowed, or stopped, there's going to be an immediate change in that churn process. What's going to happen? There'll be less money in circulation now, Depending on how much less, businesses are going to have to make decisions, maybe lay people off, maybe go out of business. Families are going to have to make decisions on how they spend some of their money and may have to postpone some critical things until the next gush of money comes into the economy, if it ever comes at all. So how do we do that? How do we improve this? How do we become more consistent? We do it by having the volume of money coming into our area by these primary industries become regular and dependable. Areas with the most consistent economies are those areas that have multiple primary industries. So I put a whole bunch of buckets up here, but a whole bunch of these are out there. They're diversified economies, which means they're not dependent on one or two economies. That way, if there's a failure of one of many, the economic impact, the negative impact on it's not going to be nearly as great as it will be as if there's a failure of one of two, one of a couple. So when we're talking about improving our economy, we also have to talk about how we measure the growth of the economy. And there are two ways to do it. We can do it in size or volume, or we can do it in quality. And we'll talk about both of those. So let's go back here. Remember when I talked about all that money that's coming in, going into that bucket? And that back and forth of all that money, all those transactions out there, that's what all that mix and churn goes on there. You buy a pair of shoes, you go to see a doctor, right? But there's an economic impact of that. There's another component of that, and that's the value of all of that, of those transactions that occur as a result of the presence of a primary business. Everyone knows, because remember we all said we are watching the national news, we know that the GNP out there is a measure of all the transactions in the US, right? But cities and counties have a gross product too, and depending on what's going on, it can be a pretty large number. That 500 job manufacturer generated $420 million in transactions on a yearly basis. We can also do the size in gross and taxable retail sales. That's another way to measure the growth and the size of the economy. But all these dollar volumes we're talking about of the sales in this business area don't necessarily reflect what's happening with the people. So therefore, if we're going to measure economic growth as it affects people, it's most appropriately measured by, appropriately, get the word out correctly, increase in the number of jobs and the annual or the total worker earnings, which are wages, salaries, and the profits of your sole proprietors. The strongest economies in the nation have always had an increase in a significant increase in the total number of jobs and total worker earnings as the result of the growth of primary industries. The quality now, so I just talked about size, and I'm talking quality, is a reflection of the standard of living of the residents, which really is based on how much money they're making, your annual wages. Because those annual wages determine your standard of living, right? Your lifestyle. So annual wages reflect the quality of the economy, but it's the types of businesses you have in there, your primary businesses, that determines the quality. Because the area average wage of let's just say Oak Harbor's area average wage will rise as much as it can to meet the primary industries, but it'll never get to it and it'll never exceed it, because it can't. They're not the same type of industries, but that's what'll happen. But on the contrary, weak economies generally lose high-wage jobs, or they create an excess of low-wage jobs, which dilutes the quality of the economy. And that's where economic development comes in. Well, one of the ways we come in. So what is economic development? As we're talking about right now, pertaining to primary industries, our job, actually not just primary, our job is all those activities toward making our economic strength better and the quality of life better for the people that live here. If you boil it down to something simple, that's what it is. There are three basic programs that are designed to work around creating primary industries. That doesn't mean that we don't work on the other industries. We don't work with the consumptive, retail, and all those things there. We definitely do. But as we've seen now, the wealth comes into the economy from the primary businesses. So we have an existing industry program a business attraction program, and a startup program. We'll go very quickly through these. The existing industry program is about retaining and expanding what you already have. TSI about 4 or 5 years ago expanded, right? A primary industry expanded. That's exactly what we want to do. It's the most important of the 3 programs, and it's the least expensive. It's easier to keep businesses that are primary here that you already have than it is to bring a new one in. Therefore, all of these existing primary industries are more important to us as Oak Harbor as any primary industry that we may be trying to bring in. Once they're here, they're important, but right now, the ones that are here are more important to us. So our job with them is to focus on ways of reducing cost to them as much as we can so that they can become as profitable as possible. Because we're on an island, but it wouldn't even matter. Even if we were in Mount Vernon, just because a primary business seems like it's geographically bound and can't leave, if they can't be profitable, they'll either close, shut down until profitability returns, or they will leave. The next one is the business attraction program, which is about bringing new primary businesses into the area so we can increase the quantity and quality of the money that comes into our area. And again, helping make us a more diverse economy. Remember, one of many versus one of a couple. These are essential programs. Whoops, let me go back. They're essential programs, but are time consuming, they're expensive, and they take years to do it. Economic development is not a snap program, it's a long-term thing. But you do it, who here owns a business? I know one does, so, right? So you do these programs much like you would if you own a business. What is it you're selling? Who wants what you have to sell? Who can benefit from what you have to sell? And then you market it. That's how your business attraction program goes. But we also have to remember one thing. We all love Oak Harbor, it's a great community, but it's not the community we're selling. What we're selling is a geographic location that has economic assets that are going to let these companies be profitable. And lastly, we have the startup program. That's designed to cause the creation of these primary companies that hopefully have a chance to grow and develop into wealth contributors for us. By assisting these young entrepreneurs, I mean young as in either age or in their time as an entrepreneur, an idea that they have can hopefully grow into a thriving business. I said I worked for Hewlett Packard, my first job when I retired from the Navy. Hewlett Packard was a startup company at one time. 367 Addison Avenue in Palo Alto, California, 1939. Bill Hewlett, Dave Packard built the first oscilloscope in there, and that's a museum now, by the way. The garage, it's always termed the garage when I was in Hewlett Packard, is the birthplace of Silicon Valley. So who knows? Maybe we'll have the birthplace of something else here in Oak Harbor sometime. You never know. Just like the business attraction program, though, this is long-term stuff, so we have to have a lot of patience with it. But overall, economic development efforts need to focus on, most of the activity needs to focus on taking care of what's here, trying to bring new things in, and cause the creation of more primary wealth contributing companies. All the other jobs that we have in the area, which consume the money that comes flowing in from all of them, they'll take care of themselves as the result of an expanding marketplace. So what's the next logical question to ask? What types of businesses should we bring here? When we as a community are doing our economic development program, we need to focus on the ones that are going to have the greatest impact, enhance us the most. Remember I talked about they're not all created equal. And not a lot of those companies out there, these primary industries, Oak Harbor, Whidbey Island is not going to be a place they're going to want to go anyway. We'll see a couple examples of that. If you're in an area that's growing and dynamic though, you want to set the bar really high. You want to target the highest paying companies that you can get that can use your assets you have, those geographic economic assets. By having those in there, we draw those the quality of life, the average wages go up. But if you're but if you were in an economically distressed area with high unemployment, first you want to get the size of the economy back up, absorb the workforce that's not working right now so you can get more money back into the bucket. You still focus on primary companies but you're not so worried about the wages that are paid. You're just trying to get the economy stabilized and moving again. There are 4 things that are going to affect the impact of a business on an economy, though. Oh, it did go, just delayed. The wages, the amount of local support that they need, the capital investment they make, and then the potential for other companies to grow as a result of their presence. So those are the 4 things that are going to measure the impact of a company that comes in here. So let's take a look at 2 examples here. We have an automobile assembly plant, 1,000 people putting together cars. The factory and the equipment's going to be very expensive. Wages are going to be high. And it's likely, according to the source, that about 5,000 people employed by more than 50 companies within a 24-hour delivery area will find jobs, basically creating the parts that come to be put together. So as a result, what you have there is you have a business that has a huge economic impact, positively. But what if you had a 1,000-person insurance company headquarters that came in here? Wages are high, actuaries and executives make good money, but they don't need as many local businesses to support. And they're going to use an office building, which isn't as expensive to report, or that capital investment, as an automobile manufacturer would. While it's still, I wouldn't turn down one of these businesses here, the overall impact is going to be less than the auto manufacturer. And we talked about that earlier. Some businesses just do better than others as far as what you're doing. And you'll see this in the PDF that you have on the flow of money. He has 10 more examples in there. 10 was way too many to bring in here today. But within each of those businesses that you're looking at and the types, there are going to be exceptions to it as well, because it's going to be based on 2 things: the wages of the level paid and the consistency of employment. So that means some are going to pay more, some are going to pay less, some are going to hire more people, some are going to hire less, and some are going to make a greater investment, and some are going to make less of an investment. So how do we do this? The first step that we have to do in trying to get primary employers to either expand or locate here is to understand the most important concern that they have. So 3 business owners here, what's the most important concern you have of your business?
The lack of being on an island. We don't have partners pull from other communities. You take Marysville runs into Everett, which runs into this. We're kind of a little isolated. So it's a little better off the I-5.
Okay, I'm looking for a different word though. Profitability. I didn't start my business I started my business to make money. Companies don't start businesses, and I know none of you did, none of you started a business to provide jobs, to pay local taxes, or to add to the bucket of wealth. You did it for one purpose, like this says primary businesses, but I don't care, any business. You do it to make money, and if you don't, then you're out of business, right? So a business that's looking to move somewhere goes through a site selection evaluation. And it's going to look at hundreds of things out there. Wages, it's going to look at cost of utilities, it's going to look at transportation systems, it's going to look at state and local taxes that are in there, it's going to look at your workforce, so that's the education, higher education resources that you have in an area. And again, like I said, probably about 100 more things they're going to look at. But they're going to end up with about 1 to 2 things that they're looking at primarily. If you need an abundant supply of cheap electricity, well, guess what? There we go, it did it. The communities that have low electric rates are probably the ones that are going to be considered more than those that have higher rates. A major distribution center isn't going to locate somewhere that's not direct access to an interstate highway system. So that sort of leaves us out, doesn't it? A corporate headquarters typically wants to be no more than about an hour from an airport. And we talked about the manufacturing plant up there, or data centers. They're going to put hundreds of millions of dollars into a building, so what's going to be important to them? Property tax rates. And they're not always looking for the cheapest area, but they're looking for the area that's going to give them the best value, because communities which are going to allow them to be the most profitable are the ones that are going to get considered. So that's the thing we always have to consider, is their profitability. And also think about this. There are 6,000 economic development organizations in the country right now, all attempting to improve the condition of their local economies like we're going to try to do. So competition's going to be fierce because there's going to be a limited number of these contributory businesses that are looking to expand and relocate. So how do we differentiate ourselves? Do we need incentives? We'll talk really quickly about incentives. They're generally designed, I don't think I'm saying anything that most people in here don't already know, to reduce initial setup and long-term operating costs. That's the whole purpose of them, so that they can become profitable. Because local government profits as much as anyone when the economy grows. And to be competitive in today's economic development marketplace, we need to have some type of incentive program available. Why? Because community leaders all over know that if they're not trying to grow economically, eventually it's going to start to decline on them. And while incentives are important to sweeten the deal, there are two things, the two most important issues, that if they can't answer these questions satisfactorily, you won't even get to the incentive stage. I went a little quick with my finger on that one there. The second most important issue, trained or trainable workforce. Businesses have to have people to do the work, and it can't just be bodies, especially if we're going for like what we in Oak Harbor would be going for most likely, I'm thinking, these higher wage employers. A bunch of bodies may not fit what they're trying to do. They may not have the education level. Top tier businesses are going to seek a community in which the workforce is either trained or they're trainable. And then they're going to evaluate all the skills and the workers in that area. And in today's modern stuff, when you see these new manufacturing plants coming in today, there aren't very many general laborers. There just aren't. Most of the people in there are doing highly technical tasks which require higher level of education, which actually applies to about most of your top tier wage sectors. Most of them are going to be about the same. But the opposite also occurs. Low wage employers, they need people with modest skills, people that can be quickly trained, who don't need as much education. So when a primary employer is coming into an area, it's going to review all the current industries. It's going to, if it needs a lot of high-skilled people, and that group of people isn't present, they're going to move on to the next community. So, as a community, for us to make ourselves ready for these high-wage these companies, we need to address or look at the skill and education level of our people, because that's going to determine the quality of those people that these businesses that come in. And remember, it's the types of business that determines the quality of our economy. And then there's the most important issue. The most important issue relative to site selection process is what? A gold star to whoever gets this. Okay, 3, 2. Having an actual site. You've got to have a place for them to go. Without developed, approved real estate for primary employers, the economy is going to eventually decline. I think you'll like this one there, Counselor. Economic development ultimately is a real estate transaction for an existing company to expand, a new company to locate here, or a startup to grow. They need a place to do it. They have to have a building. And if there's not one there, they're going to have to build one, which means land has to be shovel-ready, has to be developed. Equally important as being developed is it has to be approved by the local government, and all the planning and zoning issues have to have been resolved. So developed and approved land. All the other things that they're going to look at, we've talked about transportation, utilities, labor, taxes, things like that. If there's not a place like this for them, they're not even going to get to that stage in the checklist. Why? Because they don't have time. If they're looking to go do something, they don't have time to wait for a community to build what they need, or to go through the legislative process to get all these approvals done. That could take 1 to 2 years or more in some areas. And in the vast, and this was a surprising thing I learned in this when I first got this thing years ago, a vast majority of communities in the United States have a shortage of real estate available for primary employers. I thought that was Kind of interesting. But a lot of communities out there see that, they understand the issue, and they invest in community-owned land for these primary employers. They are reserved for them alone, not for consumptive people, and it's looked upon as a long-term investment for them. And they also know it could take 10 to 20 years for all of that land, what we call industrial north, just for our purposes, it could take a long time for all that to get filled with what we wanted to get filled with, and then we're right back where we were. There's no land for anyone else to come in. So, as we're getting close to the end here, I knew you guys were getting ready. So given the two most important issues, that we have developed approved real estate and we have a trained or trainable workforce, are we guaranteed to have economic growth? Well, obviously, you know it's a trick answer. The answer is no, but we have a chance. But if we don't have that, then we don't have a chance. And that's why community leaders need to look long-term whenever they're doing their economic development planning. So that's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot to digest. So CAC did 30,000 feet, but I was at 50,000 in an SR 71. That file you have has a lot more detail. Everything that I've said in here basically is in there with a lot more detail. It's a good read if this is something that interests you. I highly encourage you to do so. But a quick review. What is a local economy? Just to recap, a place where people live, work, earn, and spend their money. Growth is depending on money that flows into the area principally by primary industries. And when that money flows in, as that fresh flow comes in, it goes into that bucket, it circulates, it creates the profits and earnings of all the other businesses and local government. Therefore, if we want to keep growing and improving our economy, we need to increase the number of primary businesses which pay a wage a little bit higher or higher than the area average. And depending on where you look, right now I'm using 45,000 as the area average individual wage. And to do this, we have to focus our economic development efforts on finding the companies that can utilize what we have to offer, and they'll have the greatest impact on us. So existing companies, I said they're the most important. We need to encourage them, not ignore them. New companies need to be welcomed and not protested. The strongest economies have the full support of the people and all local governments out there. And usually, if there's a sour attitude toward economic development, it's probably a result of people not understanding what it is, which is one of the goals of one of my plans, is this community education campaign. How do we get people to understand what this is? But there's an unavoidable truth out there that we have to face. One issue that determines if our area grows or doesn't grow. Local community attitude. In order to do all the things necessary to create that robust, resilient economy that I mentioned at the beginning, the community, all the stakeholders, everyone out there has to be supportive of this. Laws need to encourage economic growth, not stifle it. And equally important, all the stakeholders need to understand how economies work and how the decisions that are going to be made are going to benefit them. And here we are at the unavoidable truth. Okay, that was good.
It's up there.
Oh, there we go. I don't know why it went off here. It's not going to be the ability or desire of a community to become prosperous that's going to be the factor. Hey, it's back. It's going to be the willingness of this remote to work correctly. It's going to be the willingness to do what's necessary to do so. So I know that's a lot. I'm going to jump now into about, since Kat cut off 5 minutes of my current activities thing here, I'll take about 3 minutes here to do this. So I got here in January, and it's been boots on the ground is what it is. I'm trying to get my arms around everything that's going on, everything I can, learn what I don't know. Just learn to know what I don't know and then go learn it. So there are too many things that I've been involved with to list them all here. It'd take another workshop session to do all that. But mostly, it's been focused, a lot of it, on taking the activities that have been in work and keeping those moving forward now with someone honchoing them. Much of what CAC said is going to obviate some of the things I'm going to say, but economic development is involved in everything he said there. I don't know what happened today down there in Coopville, but there was a hearing, and so I'm not sure what's going on the airport purchase that we've been involved with. The county commissioned the EDC to do a CEDS, a Community Economic Strategy Development. So I'm very involved in that with them. I'm on Commissioner St. Clair's Broadband Action Team, working with the EDC, and we're looking for a way to get some money to do a gap analysis inside the city limits of Oak Harbor. CAC already covered this stuff right here pretty well, so I'm going to jump past that. Industrial North Study, we're trying to get a curb grant for that. Also, the sewage expansion, I think it's from Northeast 10th, somewhere around there on Oak Harbor Street, up to, was that the right location?
We're still looking at that, but I think we want to do the study. And so
Yeah.
we do have the
Yeah.
county economic development, a rural county economic development grant to do the study and determine how we roll that in.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, and then Mayor turned me on to Whidbey Task Force, so I've got that now. I'm off and running on that, trying to find out who all the major players, who the minor players are, and then start figuring out how we support them better. And then, of course, that means we're supporting the Navy better, but that's good money, that's primary money, so we want as much of that money coming here as we can, and we want the Navy here, because the Navy is the largest economic powerhouse in our county and in the surrounding 5 counties. And then we run into Kitsap County, where they're still a major place. I'm on the Active Transportation Steering Committee. I attend all the unified meetings. For those that don't, is everyone in here? The unified meetings is a weekly meeting that gets everyone together to talk about the things that are coming up from planning and engineering type things. And I go to the pertinent pre-app meetings for that, which are always exciting. I go to all the ribbon cuttings, and I see 3 of the counselors there at those. So if I haven't seen you at one of them yet, I may not have been the one you went to. Also, if you go to the EDC, the Economic Development webpage on our website, back in January, I did 2 reports that are up there. The retail leakage report for Oak Harbor and the demographics report for Oak Harbor. Now I'm moving into what I call the discovery and assessment phase. And this is all about how we come up with our strategic plan that ties into the comprehensive plan. There's going to be a lot of analysis on land, transportation, connectivity, workforce development, quality of life, workforce housing, livability, things like that. We've already talked about technology. And we're a rural economy. There are advantages to a rural economy, and there are challenges to a rural economy, so we need to know that. Then I'm going to be working on a SWOT, eventually, multiple SWOTs probably, actually not probably, definitely, about how do we identify what our strengths and weaknesses are, and our opportunities and our threats at the city level and at our business climate level. I've already been working relationships up there. I've built some pretty good relationships, I think, within the staff. I need to work more on some intergovernmental relationships as those things start to come into more play. I'm neck deep with the Chamber, Main Street, and the EDC, so those are strong. From a workforce development, I need to get into the education groups now. Up there, that's coming. And then with all the other local businesses, stakeholders, and the subject matter experts that are out there, eventually we'll develop a business attraction team. I said community education earlier, that's this presentation. But it needs to be a broader delivery out there, and I'm working with Sabrina on how to get that out there in more bite-sized pieces probably, but something so people who are going to be out there looking, those that are going to be involved, have that baseline knowledge that I talked about at the beginning. And then it's all about what do we want to do, how do we do it, how do we measure it, who we want to go for, review it, plan it, communicate it, and then execute it. So thank you for inviting me here. I hope it served you. And I'm available for questions, and I'll hang around even after if anyone wants to chat later.
Thank you very much, Steve. Nice job. We are getting up against time here, but I'll open it up for questions. Anybody got any questions or input, comments? Yes, Mr. Stuckey.
2 questions. I'm going to just ask them both and let you go into it. One, you talked about community buy-in, and that's important. And a lot of that, unfortunately, happens on social media. Let's be honest. You look at the Sonic, and I understand Sonic would be coming here, and those would be low-wage jobs. I understand a little bit more.
Yep.
But something like that still gets a ton of the community just rallying and saying, we don't want this here. Mm-hmm. How do you combat something like that? And then my second question is, you mentioned the business attraction team, which is wonderful because that's a step towards something that sounds tangible to me, and I'm all about tangibility. but what would that team look like, their activities, and what sort of time frame until that team would be of use? And broad terms, of course. Thank you.
I'm not sure I know how to answer the Sonic question. How you doing? Someone had land and someone, like we talked about the building, someone had land and someone wanted to buy it and they wanted to offload the land and make money.
How do you convey how that helps other aspects of the economy?
Well, it'll provide some jobs, but they're not going to be the type of wage jobs that you're looking for. But it also, those will be jobs that will get a younger workforce, like out of high school, college, into the workforce and learning how to have a job would be one way to spin that without thinking more about it. The business attraction team, that would come at basically the business attraction team is government, citizens, local businesses, all the stakeholders out there, representation from all that. That's the business attraction team. And once we have our strategy set, that would be being put together through that. Hopefully they're part of that strategy, the building of that strategy. And then once it's all set and approved, then we're off and marching.
3 years, 5 years, 1 year?
Oh, I'd like to believe that 1.5 to 2 years. I'd like to believe that. But there are a lot of things that have to be done between now and then. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Just a comment, or I guess questions built in here. So being on the school bond committee, you're going to have to deal with a lot of NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And it's going to affect the folks that are elected in this room. Whether you put low-income housing, okay, in someone's backyard, you put additional services like schools in someone's backyard, and not sure anything's going to move forward until we actually have low-income housing or additional housing sources, because we don't have. I'm going to speak for the people that have business here, but there's no labor force here. We're paying $20 for a hamburger now in restaurants because they got to pay their staff. We've seen, I guess from a real estate standpoint, I'm going to make up a number, but real estate go up in the last 2 years over 20% in this area. Am I close? I've seen. It's just, it's chicken and egg thing, and good luck to you. I would have loved to see the affordable housing and housing issue moved up a little bit higher on the list.
It's just as they came to my mind is how I put them on the list.
Gotcha.
But it's there. And I don't know how, maybe David, there are, I don't know, more than a handful of apartments and big, like high volume apartments going in work right now, aren't there?
Yeah, we have several apartment buildings that are coming through the plan review process and are permitted as well. So we have quite a bit happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not going to answer, 5 apartment buildings isn't going to answer your question, but we're on the way, at least things are moving toward that direction, but it's a big issue. How do you define affordable housing becomes another issue. I mean, so every community might define it differently.
Yeah, the simple summary is that you have to have community development in order to have economic development, and they work hand in hand with each other. And that's talked about the attitude and the desirability. So you've got to work on both of those issues to attract and maintain businesses. We don't want to lose businesses. I mean, the whole school issue here, and I know the mayor has been going, some of the council members have been going to Pentagon because our biggest employer, we want to make sure that they know what we love them and we want them to stay here and we want them to expand. And certainly we could lose a wing, we could lose 1,000 jobs, and that certainly would ripple through the economy, and we don't want to do that. We want to maintain what we have and hopefully increase the desirability. And then we need a long-term goal has been diversifying, and so we're never going to replace the jobs that we have from the Navy, absolutely not, but if the more we can get, the better we are to have some diversity. And so, and then looking at it, I mean, we did a lot of time on the desirability of the community with the downtown, but one of my focuses on here is, he kind of alluded to it, we have a large industrial area because it's in a fly zone, we really can't do anything else with it. So we need to figure out what our neighbors, and certainly there's one of them some of them are very successful, what are they doing and what kind of niches can we kind of chip away at it and get some of those businesses. And some businesses may get priced out of Marysville, and then we're a lower area, we might be able to get them over here. So getting those niches are there and really getting those jobs is really a benefit. So it kind of goes in hand. So, but you're right, we are working on, I know the affordability is a major focus of the development service of the city council, and so we are certainly, that's statewide too, but certainly we're trying to do our best to beat the, like we talked about, the interesting, we're trying to beat, and maybe we can get ahead of the state averages and progress to do better than it was. But I mean, when the downturn hit with COVID, I mean, we didn't, luckily we had the Navy and they were very reliable, and we didn't have near the turnaround. Bellingham, it was dependent upon people coming across the border from Canada, you know, had a much more of a difficult area. So there's pros and cons with our community, but certainly we want to be on the positive side and be on the attitude of really creating a synergy in our community where we're open to businesses. We want to maintain businesses and move ahead.
So, Mr. Plumley, do you have a question or input?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Mr. McClassen. When we're building this plan out, from a sustainability standpoint, socially, environmentally, what would you recommend is done to ensure that as we bring these businesses in, we're not creating new issues around contamination, pollution, and we're also not displacing community members by bringing in those highly educated or highly trained individuals from other regions? Obviously, we would, for example, we would never get a Boeing, but if Boeing was to say, we're going to leave and we're going to come to Oak Harbor, the reality is that most of those employees would come with them, displacing the people that are here. So how do we go about making sure we protect our natural resources here and ensure that our community gets to stay our community?
I don't know that I have a complete answer to that, but I would believe that the planning, the codes that we have right now are in place for at least the natural resources and those types of things, whether at the city and at the county level, if some of these end up out in the county side of things. As far as the people goes, everything that comes here has to be evaluated on an individual basis to see what the impact's going to be. So each one might have a different set of factors that we have to consider than the other one. So that, I know that sounds like a politician type of answer, but I'm not running for office. But it's the truth though. I mean, each one of these, every time if a Boeing was to come up here, then it would be this huge research project on their part and on our part. How do we make this work, to your point, with the least impact socially, economically, resource-wise, and those types of things, to see what the best way to do it would be.
I guess where I'm going with that is, like, when we look at the marina, we look at the airport, we look at those that we're trying to create economic development through. Would now be the time to maybe be going to Skagit or going to WorkSource and finding some type of training to ensure that, should those go into become reality, that the people that live here now that are looking for meaningful employment, that want to be a part of this community, have an opportunity to compete for those jobs? Or is that part of economic development as far as we should be concerned?
No, like I said, the education level of the people here, the skill level, will determine the quality of the companies that come here. So yes, now would be a time, even though it's way out in the future for them, but still WorkSource. I know Brian over there, so those folks could actually be looking down the road once we have something for them to look to. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Hoffmeyer.
You know, within government, quite often, if a task isn't directly assigned to someone, that task goes undone. So to see all the things that you have been working on, all the tasks that you have been assigned, very encouraging. You know, you go back a year and a half ago, little more than a year and a half ago, when council had our retreat. You know, intentional economic development was near the top for all of us. And, you know, it took us a couple of attempts to get your position created and filled, but I am incredibly excited by what I've seen this far, and, you know, can't wait to see those tangible results that Councilor Stuckey was talking about. So thank you very much.
Looking forward to delivering.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for the Planning Commission members. We don't interact a lot, which is one of the reasons we had this meeting, but I'm wondering, is there anything that you need from us on the council? Is there anything we can do or are doing or not doing that you would like us to do? I'd like to hear from you in terms of what you need from us or from the city.
I'm just going to speak for myself, maybe for the commission itself. Having staff, having guidance on what you're looking for, us passing something and the council doesn't have buy-in to what staff's working on already can be kind of frustrating. Passing, potential ordinances, things like that, and have it come back and say it didn't go through or it got changed substantially, things like that. Staff having a good idea of what direction the council wants to go would be helpful to the planning commission from that standpoint. That's just my 2 cents. I'll open up to the other commissioners.
It's kind of a tough question to put you on the spot for.
So, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for that question. I agree with Commissioner CHAZZAR on a lot of those things, and I think that some form of communication with the council on a more regular basis on long-term items would definitely be valuable. I think at one point we had just very quickly talked about, and it wasn't anything that was seriously considered, but there being some type of representation of the council at the planning commission meetings where we could ask those questions that come up. Well, when you were in executive session, for example, and discussed this, what was the tone? Where were you going? What are the pitfalls that made you reconsider? Or what are the constraints legally that you were operating under that led you to the decision you were leading to? A lot of times, the city staff can answer those questions exceptionally well, but we're still always asking them to dig into somebody else's mind, and that does place them at a disadvantage when trying to do so.
Are you talking about like a liaison?
It could be a liaison, or we had talked about if just a council member were to attend the planning commission meetings, just to attend and be on site to answer questions should we have any. A lot of times the city staff will answer those questions really well, or City Administrator Oborn will answer those questions, but it's still not coming from the source. And so at best, they're trying to gauge based on how they know how you think and operate and pass decisions, what the thought process was. And that does kind of put us in a situation where we're trying to provide feedback or information that is going to support the direction that the council is trying to go. We are kind of in the dark on some of those things.
Nice to hear. Good. Thank you very much. Councilor Munz.
Thank you, Mayor. I remember early on when we were on council together that legal wouldn't let us go to your meetings because if it was going to be something we were voting on, I mean, we just wanted to sit in the back and just listen to see, because we get, like you, a short version, bullets in the minutes of what was said, or, 4 voted for it, 2 didn't, or something. I mean, but it doesn't give a lot of detail. So I don't know. We have a hearing examiner now that does more because we have to go into legal here, do we have a conflict of interest, So that would be something to explore with our attorney on that. But there was a conflict, and it kind of got beat into us if you got on council in '08 to say, no, you can't go to those meetings because you're going to have to vote, and you'll have to be able to say, oh, I don't really know anything about this, but now we're going to hear the arguments. So I don't know. The question I'd ask you, Steve, is when we lived in Virginia, people that had businesses in their house, filed for the business license, and it could be anything. And so internet was really important. Now it seems to be fiber. But the state of Virginia taxes everything. Like if you had a copy machine, you paid so much tax for that per year. And I mean, you've probably lived in that area. You know, and to me, I thought it was just too much. But anyway, but in order for us to have businesses and also to help the school district, I know that they've wanted to partner to help get the internet and fiber optics out into the community. We've got the line, I don't know where it is, it's stuck somewhere, either under the bridge or on the other side, but I mean, and how important is that would expand a lot of environmentally friendly businesses to be able to work from their home. I know my son-in-law just moved to Guala Bay. They have a good internet with Comcast at this point, but he's going to have to put in a little office because they don't have enough bedrooms. But he gets up, he starts work at 6 a.m. with the Pentagon, and he's a GS, and he gets done at 4:30 or 5, and he works 4 days a week. But it's in his office in his home. And so there might be a way, because so many people want to live here, why that isn't a draw either. But we have to be able to have that infrastructure, like you said, ready to go, just like the business park. You have to have the water and sewer and everything in there. So I just didn't know how much it seems to be stalled. We haven't heard anything more about that. And I know with, in Langley, the fiber optics that comes, but it hasn't made it up here, they have medical translators. You know, they get the thing and they're taking it and they do it digitally and then send it back. But we don't have that speed up here that I know of for someone to do a job like that here. So I'm just thinking out of the box. I'm throwing stuff, the spaghetti on the wall, and hope you can do something with it. So thanks for your presentation and the rest of the staff.
So there is, if you look at the national map, Oak Harbor's covered, and it's considered good, but there are areas that don't have it right. Fiber is in here, Ziply Fiber is doing stuff, and so what you're talking about, like the transcribers and things like, they need a lot of bandwidth for what they do. And although Comcast has good bandwidth, I use them at home, Ziply is going to have more, but Ziply is only in a certain area right now. And so can we get them to other areas? Yes, we probably can, but it's going to take some work, and then identifying which of those areas are either underserved or unserved. And I know Blaine knows more about this. He's been doing it longer, so.
No, just a quick answer here is, we talked about primary businesses, and we know that when we went to the presentation for the Rotary, they kind of reminded us that we lost a internet business, a call center, that didn't have adequate enough internet, and so we actually lost it. So that's certainly why we have that on our to-do list and are looking at it. It's a complicated issue. Should we do the Anacortes model? I'm not really inclined, but if council wanted to go that route and compete with Comcast, but certainly playing on the edge there, looking for incentives, looking for them to increase internet in the city, affordability. It's a good partnership with the school district there too, because we know a lot of people children need it at home, internet, and they don't always have the affordability. So we're looking at those areas. So we're certainly looking at a partner of the broadband action team to really look at how we increase and become more robust, and certainly with that it becomes the opportunity for in-home businesses and other types of businesses. So yes.
And to your point, Counselor, a broader range of fiber or higher speed does open you up for, you know, especially the demographic of up here at Whidbey is 31. Everywhere else in Island County is almost twice that on the median age. So software developers, you could bring a bunch of software developers up here, or a company up here. They don't need a big building. They just need to have a place that has reliable internet, which is going to be an issue, I think, if right now it comes over on telephone lines attached to power lines and stuff like that. But how do we get it to where it's more reliable and maybe some redundancy, especially for emergency management types of things? So I know that didn't completely answer your question.
No,
but we're going to work it.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? It's up to the council and the Commission. Sure.
Okay, can you borrow one of their microphones? Okay, so to Steve, how are we gonna solve the problem with the businesses that are lacking of employment right now? Like you're bringing in Sonic into the town, but there's a lot of businesses that are fast food restaurants that don't have employees to even run the businesses. So how are we gonna fix that issue? Or like downtown, all the stores mostly close by 5 p.m. Well, what happens to the people that get off at that time? And they don't have time to be shopping during the time. So they need employees to open for longer periods of time.
Well, competition for employees is going to be tough because I'm not exactly sure everything that happened in the last 3 years, but a lot of people don't want to go back into the workforce. A lot of people have opted not to. How do we get them back in there? How do we incentivize them to go back into the workforce, especially the younger demographic that wants to get in there? As far as businesses downtown, I know that's only part of an answer, but for the businesses downtown, I mean, I don't know how you make them. I mean, the only person that can make them do anything is the building owner can have in a contract, say, you have to be open until such and such, but I don't know how many building owners are going to put that into a contract. So I know exactly what you're talking about. When I was teaching all my 3 kids to driving down East Pioneer, and I remember 1983 when it was a hop in place for a young single aviator, and now it's like I was waiting for the dust balls to roll through the street. But it's kind of, if bear with me one more minute, Mayor, it's going to be a catch-22. We talked about getting the people down there, but there's got to be a draw for them to come down there. So it's sort of which is the chicken, which is the egg. Luckily, I was a poultry science major, so although I can't disclose the answer to that question due to non-disclosure agreements, but I can help try to figure it out.
Okay. Thanks again, Mr. McCaslin.
My pleasure, Mayor.
I want to thank the Planning Commission especially for coming here with us today, and my fellow people on City Council, thank you. It's been thought-provoking for me. I hope it has for you, and I think with that, I'll adjourn the City Council meeting and turn it to John to adjourn the Planning Commission meeting.
Without objection, we'll adjourn the Planning Commission meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll stand adjourned.